Hi guys, and welcome to the course on Introduction to ASP.NET Core 3.1. My name is Bhrugen and I would be your instructor on this introductory course. We will understand the basics of ASP.NET Core, the reason behind its evolution, followed by the new files and folder structure that have been introduced. Once we understand that, then we will take a look at new concepts like middleware, routing, tag helpers, Razor syntax, and much more. Now with ASP.NET Core, there are two ways to build a web application. First approach is MVC application and the second approach is Razor Pages application. We will be building projects in both the technologies to understand how the basics work. Both the projects will be built with a basic CRUD website, which stands for Create, Read, Update and Delete functionality. So we will understand how to connect with database and play with entity framework in our ASP.NET Core web application. Now before we start, there are some prerequisites that you should be familiar with. I would say about 3 months of coding in C# and familiarity with basic SQL will be sufficient. Also, if you are stuck with the course, my code will be published on GitHub repository, so you can always follow along with each lecture. And if there is something which still does not make sense for you, you can always raise a question and I will be happy to answer that. But the first approach you should take is compare your code with my version on GitHub and try to identify the differences. This way you will try to identify the errors yourself. Now this would be a basic course on ASP.NET Core, but it will give you a solid foundation before you dive into deeper and complex courses. At the end, if you are interested in more detail and in-depth courses, I have courses on both MVC as well as Razor Pages with ASP.NET Core, and I will also show you how you can enroll into those courses for the lowest price. That being said, let's get started on this exciting journey to explore the basics of ASP.NET Core, and I will see you in the next video. In this course, we'll be building two projects. First will be a simple Razor project, and second one will be our main project, which will use MVC. So let me demo the first project that we'll be building. It's a simple BookList Razor project in which if you select the book tab, it will display list of all of the books. Now here in the list you can see two types of tables. That is because at the end here we are using DataTables, which makes call of API. On top here we have a simple table using th and tr tags. Here when you create a book, if you try to enter without anything, we have validations. Once you enter the details to create a new book and you hit the create button, it creates the book and displays in both the places. Here when we use data tables, if we click edit here and if we change something, let me make it a capital W and update it. There you go. You can see it is updated. If you try to delete anything, it will display a sweet alert to you. That being said, we have multiple ways. As I was saying before, in the create new book, you'll see a new page called create. But if you go to Upsert, it will be the Upsert page, and that will be the same page that we'll use to edit. If we go right here, you see it's Upsert. And if you try here, it will be again an edit page. So this is more of a simplified view, and then at bottom what we see is more of an advanced view. That being said, we are performing CRUD operations on our book, but this project is not just that. We'll be learning Razor Pages and how page model and page view comes into the picture. So even though this is a small project for CRUD operation, there is lots of basic functionalities and basic file overview that you need to understand. That being said, let's take a look at the demo of our final project, which is way more advanced than what you see right here. In this video, let me walk you through the small project that we will build using MVC. This will be a very basic project to create CRUD operations on BookList. So right here, if you go on BookList, we will be using DataTables to display all of the list from the database. You can add a new book here. You can fill in the details, but let's say if you do not enter name, we see validations that have been enforced here. That being said, you can create a book, and once it is created, you can edit any of the details here, and you can also delete book. When you delete, we have nice alerts that you can display here, and once it is successfully deleted, you will also see nice notifications. So this is a great project to get started with the MVC journey and learn what ASP.NET Core has to offer. In this video, I want to give you a small introduction on ASP.NET Evolution. ASP.NET Core introduces probably the biggest shift the platform has experienced so far, but let's take a look at how it has evolved over time. In 1996, Microsoft released framework known as ASP, which stands for Active Server Pages or Classic ASP. With Classic ASP, Microsoft made it possible to have server-side scripting to dynamic web pages. The biggest revolution came when Microsoft released .NET Framework. Microsoft introduced ASP.NET Web Forms in 2002. This made creation of web page similar to the creation of Windows Form. There are few downsides with web forms. Web forms tried to make stateless web stateful, and in order to do that, it had to make lots of changes to make sure web pages retain their states or their values automatically. View states contained those values, and that resulted in a lot of data being generated and transferred with each request, sometimes even if it was not required. Web Forms was the first version to introduce code behind. Code behind is good, but it makes testing difficult because in one line we are reading from the database and in the next line we are updating the UI. Another common issue was page lifecycle. When requesting a page, number of events were getting fired. Getting to know all of these events was quite easy to get it wrong. Although there were few downsides, web forms were generally successful to get site up and running quickly. Couple of years later, in 2009, Microsoft released the first version of ASP.NET MVC, and they tried to overcome most of the problems with web forms. It had emphasis on separation of concern. MVC code is typically much easier to write unit test for. MVC was the first edition where they released it as open source. Now, a lot of developers did not like MVC framework because it had its own flaws. When it was created, it was built on top of the components already created for web forms, because of which it was closely tied to system.web, which was tied to IIS and eventually Windows. On the other hand, web is evolving quickly, and hence Microsoft had to keep MVC with everything that was changing. Also, MVC was built before cloud came into the big picture. Even though a lot of MVC applications are still running on cloud, but it is still not built with cloud in mind. Finally, in June of 2016, Microsoft released ASP.NET Core, and this was the first version. Now, ASP.NET Core is built on top of the new .NET Core framework. .NET Core is the very first platform version of .NET, and hence it is not tied to just Windows. ASP.NET Core, as compared to the old version of MVC, is not tied to the .NET Framework assemblies like system.web. ASP.NET Core team has been very active with the new versions, and then in 2017 they released .NET Core 2, followed by 2.1 and 2.2 in 2018. Finally, in September of 2019, ASP.NET Core 3 has been released, which we will be using in this course. In this video, let me show you all the tools that we'll need for this course. The first and most important is Visual Studio 2019. This is the IDE that we'll be using. You can go on visualstudio.microsoft.com/vs and you can download the community version for free. Make sure you download the 2019. If it is 2017, .NET Core 3.1 will not work. Next, what you need is you have to download the .NET Core 3.1 and install it. So if you go on the Microsoft website for .NET Core 3.1, here you can download the Windows for x64 and install it. Once you install it, then when you create a project in Visual Studio 2019, you will see the .NET Core 3.1 option, which I will discuss when we get there. But make sure both of these are installed. After that, you'll have to install the SQL Server 2019. You can use an older version of SQL Server, but I would recommend the latest one. You can download it for free for the developer version. Once you install SQL Server, I also want you to install the SQL Server Management Studio, which will be a UI to your SQL Server. So make sure you install all 4 of these features, and that are all the tools that you will need. All of these tools are free, so you should not have to spend anything to install these softwares on your laptop or desktop. In this video, I want to show you where you will find all the code that we'll be building. For that, one place will be you have to go to Bhrugen.com. In there, I have courses. Right now, we are on the free course. If you go on the details, if you click course content, it will download the completed code. But if you want lecture by lecture on what was changed, you can click on GitHub code. Here, it will open up both the projects that we'll be building in this course. Here, if you see the comments, they will be based on the lecture name. Inside Razor as well, for each lecture, you will see what exactly was changed or updated. And you can make sure that you have those same things if you face any issue in a particular lecture. So Bhrugen.com, and in there you have to go to the courses to find out what course you're on, and in there in details, you will find the GitHub link. In this section, we will be creating our very first project. It will be a Razor project, and then once we create it, we will take a look at the file and folders that are created. With this, we will also understand how an ASP.NET Core application is started and what are the files that are involved. So let's get started with all of that from the next video. When you open up Visual Studio 2019, it displays a nice page. On the left hand side, you can see all the projects you were working on, and on the right hand side, you can see options to create a new project. So right here, we'll click on create a new project, and once you do that, it will display all of the templates that are available. Out of this, we will select ASP.NET Core Web Application. If you do not see on the top few options, you can always search for that template on the top. Once you find the ASP.NET Core Web Application, let's hit the next button, and we need a project name. Let's call this BookList Razor, and we'll change the location. I'll paste the location where I want to create this project. After that, we'll hit the create button, and we'll have more options for our project. In here, the first thing to notice is we have .NET Core and the .NET Framework. We will be using the .NET Core, and what version we want to use? We want to use the latest version, which is ASP.NET Core 3.1. Once you select that, then we have few templates here. We can go with an empty application, an API project, a web application which uses the Razor pages, or we can create an application with MVC. Our main project will be built using MVC, but the first project I want to give you an introduction to Razor Pages. Here, I will display a CRUD operations so that you can get comfortable with Razor Pages because that will be used inside the identity in our MVC application. So we'll get a basic overview when we build this project. Next, we have the authentication here. You can select individual user's account for authentication, but right now we do not want to do that, because if we do that, some of the things will already be configured for us. But I want to start from scratch in this project, so we'll just create a web application with Razor Pages. Then, before proceeding, we'll make sure the source is .NET Core 3.1 and we'll hit the Create button. Perfect, so with this we have created our project and we'll be taking a look at all the files and folders that we created from the next video. In this video, we will take a brief overview on what are Razor Pages. Razor Pages have been introduced in ASP.NET Core 2.0 and since then they have become the default way of coding with ASP.NET Core stack. Razor Pages is a new feature of ASP.NET Core that makes coding page-focused scenarios more easier and more productive. They provide a simpler way to organize code within ASP.NET Core applications, keeping the implementation logic and view models closer to the view implementation code. Razor Pages is not just for simple scenarios. Everything that you can do with MVC, you can do the same using Razor Pages, like routing, models, action result, tag helpers, and so on. Finally, Razor Pages have two parts. First is the UI, which is more like the view in MVC, and then we have the page model, which is a combination of models as well as view models and the controller action methods. Let me switch back to the application that we just created and give you a quick demo of both the component. So we are on the BookList Razor. If we go to Solution Explorer, inside Pages, we will have the Razor Pages. Let's take a look at the index page. If you see, the index page has an arrow and there is .cshtml and .cshtml.cs. If you open the .cshtml, that is the Razor View or the UI of Razor Pages. And then the .cs, which is not same as the code behind file, it is just a naming convention, but this is actually the page model for our index Razor page. You can see it extends from the page model class. Inside this page model, we will define the model for this view. Right here you can see it is index model, and if you go on index, you can see the class name is index model. In here we have handlers, which are like the controller action method. Right now we only have the get handler that is defined here, but we will be adding a post handler when we want to post anything from our view or the Razor page. Another thing to notice is the name. For the get handler, it is prefixed with the on keyword. Similarly, if you had a post handler, it would be something like this, in which we'll have public void on post and we'll have the implementation within the brackets. We will undo the change that we did because I just wanted to show that right now. But as we proceed, we will be implementing the handlers for our Razor Pages. In this video, let's take a look at the project configuration file. In order to open that, you can right-click on the project, not on the solution, but on the project, and you have the edit project file. Or all you can do is double-click on the project name and it will open up the project file. The file name would be the project name and then the extension .csproj. Project file has been there since a long time, but the format of the file and how it works is different in ASP.NET Core 3. In the initial versions of ASP.NET Core, we had files called project.json and xproj. The new csproj file replaces both the file. Now right here you can see within property group we have the target framework, which is Netcore App 3.0, which is what we are using for this project. The target framework here is also called a node. After that we will be adding more packages into our solution. Let me show you a quick way. We go to Tools, NuGet Package Manager, Solution, and if we go on Browse, let me install any first package that we have. We have newtonsoft.json, so we'll just install that. Don't worry, we'll come back and uninstall this, but I want to show you for demo purposes how the project file will be affected. Perfect, this is installed. If you go to the project file again, now you see a package reference with newtonsoft.json. So every time you add a NuGet package, a package reference entry would be added here. Right now we only have one of them, which we just added, and if we uninstall this, it will go away. If we go back, this should be gone. Whenever we need to add more packages, we'll be adding more packages as per our requirement. Now, if you have worked with previous versions of ASP.NET Core, there was a NuGet for meta package. And let me switch to the presentation for that. And here we will be discussing what was the meta package and what is done with that. The package has been discontinued and now it is a part of the .NET Core class library. They are now updated automatically when you update the version of .NET Core. Prior to 3.0, as I said before, the meta package was included as a NuGet package. But now, when you install .NET Core on your Windows or laptop, that meta package is installed automatically. Also, some of the packages have been moved out from that meta package, like Entity Framework Core, which has been moved to its own NuGet package, which we will be installing in the future videos. So that was a brief overview of where the meta package is. Now with .NET Core 3, you will no longer see the meta package microsoft.aspnetcore.app. It has been moved within the .NET framework, so it is installed automatically when you install .NET Core. So that gives a brief overview of the csproj file. Mainly it is to reference all of the NuGet packages and the target framework. In this video, we will be taking a look at the properties in our folder. If you expand the properties, you will see a file called launchsettings.json. This file tells Visual Studio what to do when you press the Run button right here on the top. By default, we have few profiles here. The first one is the IIS Express, which will launch IIS Express, which will host the application and start a browser that will hit the URL. It will also set the environment variables to development in this case. We can detect the environment variables and make changes based on that. Example, if it is development, we will load the full CSS, and if it is production, then we will load the minified version of CSS. There is also a section to configure the IIS Express. Here you can set the launch variables. Here, if you scroll down further, we have another profile called as BookList Razor, which is the project name. It will run the application as a command line application, so the internal Kestrel, which is internal web server, would be used. Then a browser would be started, which hits the URL. These can also be set by going into the properties of the project, not the solution. And if we go on debug, we have all the profiles right here, and you can set the environment variables, URL, SSL, and other configuration. We will not be altering any of this, but I wanted to show you an overview of what it is and where you can change that. Also inside the run here, you will see all the profiles, so you can select anyone to run your application. The next thing that we'll be taking a look is the www.root folder. If you expand this, you will see folders for CSS, JS, lib. This is a new thing that has been introduced with ASP.NET Core, and this has been created automatically. In this folder, we will be placing all the static files like images, CSS, JavaScript, and also static HTML. This folder is the root folder for our website. None of the code files that we'll be creating will go inside this folder. So you shouldn't be placing any C# or Razor files here. This folder has been created with an idea of having a nice separation between code files and the static files. Since we created the application using MVC template, we can see that Visual Studio has already placed few Bootstrap, CSS, and other static files for us. If you expand CSS, you see site.css. With JS, you have site.js, and inside the lib folder, we have Bootstrap, jQuery, validations, and some other scripts. Now the reason we have all this CSS and JavaScript by default is we created the web application as a Razor page. If we selected an empty application, we would have to add all these files by ourselves. If you want to explore that option, you can go ahead with that, but we'll be leaving right it is. When we'll be adding more CSS or JavaScript, we'll always do that inside our www.root folder, so that is the one place for all of your static files. In this video, we will be taking a look at the pages folder inside our Razor project. So the main folder inside any Razor project is the pages folder. In here, we will have all the pages that we want for our website. Inside the pages folder, you see a shared folder, and if you expand this, we have underscore layout and validation scripts partial. Now the name of these two Razor pages starts with an underscore, which means they are partial views. Now partial pages is something like user components, which means you can reuse them in multiple places in your website. The first one here, underscore layout, is the default master page for your application. So if you open this up right here, you see we have the header for our application. You scroll down, we have the main part, and we have the footer. We also have the scripts that we want throughout our application, and if you scroll up right here, we have the CSS files. You can of course change the default page that you have for the master page, but we will keep it the same, and right now it is underscore layout. Next, what we have is validation scripts partial. Here we have just included the JavaScripts or jQuery that we will use for validations, and in the pages where we want to include that, we can just include this partial page. After that, outside of the shared folder, we have the view import. Now with .NET Core 2.0 and above, we have tag helpers, and we will understand in detail about tag helpers in just a little while. But in the view import, you define that you want to include tag helpers in your application by adding this one line which starts with @tagHelper. You can also add custom tag helpers here if you create your own tag helpers and you want to register for this application. You can also add your custom tag helpers that you want to be used in your application. If for some reason you only want to use tag helpers for some pages, rather than defining this at global level, you can also define it at individual page. But I like to define it at the global level in underscore view imports so that when I need it, it is already present. After that, we have the underscore view start file, and here we define which is the master page that we'll use for our application. Right here, you can see underscore layout has been defined. After that, what we have, the rest three are the actual Razor pages. So you can think about whatever we discussed so far are more related to configuration, master page, and user component. Then we have the error page, index page, and the privacy page. Now if you open up the index.cshtml, right here you see the UI or the user interface with HTML and CSS. But where is the page behind or the model defined here? In MVC, we used to have controllers, but we do not have that anymore in the Razor pages. So if you expand this, you see there is index.cshtml.cs, and this is inheriting from page model, and the name here is index model. If you go to the index page, you will see the model is the same name. So whatever we define inside the page model here will be used as the model for the index Razor page. This page model will be a code behind for our index page. This is nowhere as close to what we had in the classic ASP.NET code behind. This is completely rewritten and in a completely different format. And we will call this .cs file as the page model, and the .cs.html will be the view or the Razor page. Now that we have a brief overview of where what code goes, let's see routing in the next video when we will see the index privacy and the application coming along. One of the top-level considerations for the developer of a server-side web application framework is how to match URLs to the resources on the server so that the correct one processes the request. The most straightforward approach is that you map URLs to the physical files on the disk, and this is the approach that has been implemented by the ASP.NET Core team for Razor Pages framework. Now there are some rules on how Razor Pages framework matches URL to files and how rules can be customized to give different results if needed. The first rule is that Razor Pages needs a root folder. By default, the folder has been named Pages and its location is inside the root folder of the web application project. You can configure another folder as the root folder in the application configuration services method inside the startup class, but that is beyond the scope of this course, so we will leave that as the default page. If we have any requirements that we had to change that, we would of course take a look at that. Let's switch back to the application that we have. Right here you see the root folder is the pages folder and all of the pages resides inside that. Of course we can add areas here and we can add pages inside the areas folder, then that will become the root folder for the application. Another rule is that the file extension should not be included inside the URL path. So right here you see index.cshtml. Inside the URL we will only mention index. Then let me switch back to the presentation, and the third rule is that index.cshtml is the default file, which means if a file name is missing from the URL, the request will be mapped to index.cshtml inside that folder. Now let's take a look at few examples. In the first example, we have www.domain.com. This will map to the pages folder and then look for index.cshtml page. Since we have not defined anything in the URL, index is the default page. In the second example, we have www.domain.com/index. Again, in this, it will look for the same index page inside the pages folder because we have explicitly defined the index page. Finally, we have www.domain.com/account. Now here it has two ways to find the page. First, it will try to find inside the pages folder. Pages folder a file named as account.cshtml. If it finds that, it will render that. If it doesn't find that, then it thinks that account could be a subfolder name under pages. So it will check inside the pages folder if there is a folder called account, and inside that it will try to find index.cshtml. So we have few examples here for routing. Let's see this in action. Let's go to our project and run the application. In here you can see the URL is localhost and we do not have anything else. So that means by default it is loading the index page. If we go back to our application, Solution Explorer, double-click index, you can see the text is welcome and that is what we are seeing right here. If we explicitly defined index here, it will still load the same page. Now if we click on privacy here, you can see it is adding privacy, and if we go back to the solution, privacy is inside pages, so you can directly access that. Let me stop the application and show you something else. I'll add a new folder and I'll call this with my name Bhrugen here, and I will move privacy inside Bhrugen. Let's run our application and try to access the privacy again. If we click here, it will not load anything because privacy doesn't exist in the same location. In order to access that, you have to type Bhrugen/privacy. And with this, it loads the privacy page correctly. So that way you can see that the linking of all the pages is exactly what you see here. I'll move the privacy back inside the pages folder and I'll delete my folder. Not rename. Perfect. So this was a brief overview on how routing works, and we'll be using more tag helpers and routing as we proceed with the course. In this video, we will take a look at tag helpers. Tag helpers are brand new to ASP.NET Core. Microsoft looked at the success around the other libraries like AngularJS, React, and others, and decided that implementing an Angular directive-like experience in the new ASP.NET was so important to the adoption of ASP.NET Core, and because of which they decided to create tag helpers from ground up. Tag helpers enable server-side code to participate in creating and rendering HTML elements inside the Razor files. Though there are similarities between Angular directives and tag helpers, there is a major difference. Tag helpers are for server-side rendering, while AngularJS directives are all about client-side rendering. Now you might be wondering how tag helpers are compared to HTML helpers if you have worked with previous versions of .NET Core. HTML helpers are really just methods throughout your Razor markup. Tag helpers, on the other hand, are very focused around HTML elements and much more natural to use. Now let's switch back to the application and let's take a look at few tag helpers that we already have. In here, let's go on the index page, and we do not have any tag helpers associated inside here. But if we go on underscore layout, there should be plenty of tag helpers. Right here, you can see the tag helpers ASP area and ASP page. When we have to redirect to any of the Razor pages, we will use the tag helper ASP page and then we'll define the path. Right here, we want to go to the index page, which is inside the pages folder. Hence, we have defined /index. Then if you scroll down with more navigations, we again have those tag helpers. If you scroll down further, right here we have another tag helper, and with the script we have the ASP append version tag helper. We will be using more tag helpers for labels, forms, and all of the buttons, but we'll do that when we proceed. But the main thing about tag helpers is you can use your regular HTML tag and you can just append a tag helper like you can with other JavaScript frameworks. Also, I want to show you few similarities that we have between the HTML helpers and tag helpers. Both HTML helpers and tag helpers perform the same functionality. But here you can see that the label tag is so not HTML friendly for HTML helper. But when you use tag helper, you'll be using the same label tag, class attributes. All you have to do is add ASP for tag helper. If you do not understand all of this right now, do not worry. As we proceed and start coding, this will start to make much more sense. In classic ASP.NET, code in the system.webassembly took care of starting the application, and global.asax had the methods in which you could provide custom logic. The steps needed to start up an application are now determined by you, and that starts with the program class file. The program class contains a main method which is the entry point for the application. When the runtime executes the application, it looks for this main method and calls it. Most .NET applications start up using the main method. The application initially starts as a command line application. The main method configures ASP.NET Core and starts it. Let's switch back to the application and take a look at this. So right here, we'll go to Solution Explorer and we have the program.cs. In here, you see we have a main method. Here, the configuration is done by calling createHostBuilder, which is a method in the program class that returns iHostBuilder. On that object, build and run is called. And from that point onwards, this application has become an ASP.NET Core application. CreateHostBuilder calls createDefaultBuilder on a static web host class that configures the web host using defaults. It deals with the configuration on how ASP.NET Core deals with web server configuration, files, routing, and so on. You can see on top of the default configuration done by the createDefaultBuilder, the web builder is also configured to use a startup class file. And if you go on the startup class file by pressing F12 here, or you can go to Solution Explorer, startup class file. Right here you can see startup class is a simple class not deriving from any other class. The runtime will by convention call two methods here. First is the configure services and we have the configure method. Let's take a look at both of them and the startup class file in the next video. As we saw in the previous clip, the runtime executes main, which among other things configures the startup class. The runtime will call methods configure services and configure. Here we have an iConfiguration object that is being passed as dependency injection to the startup class. Here with the configure services, it is written this method gets called by runtime. It is used to add services to the container. The purpose of configure services method is to configure dependency injection. Dependency injection in classic ASP.NET was optional. In ASP.NET Core, it forms an integral part of the ASP.NET itself. This method adds services to the application to make them available. You get the service collection object that is injected into the method as parameter. Now you can use this to build on the services that would be available to this application. Examples of the services would be Entity Framework Core, Identity Service, MVC, and many more. By default, you will have the Add Razor pages available. You will not have the Razor compilation here. So do not worry, it should look like this. You will only have the Add Razor pages, and this is because when we created the project, we selected that we want the Razor pages. The other method is the configure method, and here this method is used to configure the HTTP request pipeline. The pipeline specifies how the application should respond to HTTP requests. Pipeline is composed of individual parts called middleware. Let me switch to a presentation to explain that better. Now in any general scenario, what we will have is we will have a browser and then we will have a pipeline in which we will make a request and we will get back a response. The individual parts that make up a pipeline are called middlewares. Let's consider a few of the middlewares that we can add in a pipeline. One of them can be MVC, and then we can also add authentication and static files. You should notice that when we add authentication middleware, it should be done before we add MVC, and the order is important. The reason is we do not want to load MVC and then find out that user is not authenticated. We also have to configure a middleware for static files in our project like HTML files, images, CSS, or JavaScript files. Now when the data travels through the pipeline, it gets manipulated by individual middlewares, and so does the response or the result. Let's take a look at a 10,000-foot image of what happens when this request is made in the next video. So when the request is made from the browser, it first arrives at a web server like IIS. IIS will then invoke the .NET runtime, which would load the CLR and then look for an entry point in your application. It will find that in the main method of the program class and execute it, which starts the internal web server in your application. We will have Kestrel in our application. The main method and the startup class would configure the application, and the request would be routed from IIS to Kestrel, and then it will be pushed to the application. After that, it will be processed by all the middlewares, and the generated response will be routed back to the Kestrel, which will route it back to the IIS. That will finally produce the response on the browser. This is much more efficient than the old system.web approach. Classic system relied heavily on system.web, which was tied to IIS. But using a pipeline approach, we only plug in the middlewares that we need. Everything we plug in is in a separate assembly exposed in a NuGet. Now since system.web was tied to IIS and IIS is tied to Windows, that is the reason you cannot run classic ASP.NET on other web servers than IIS and Windows. Now since that is no longer the case, ASP.NET Core applications can be run on web servers and other operating systems. One thing you should keep in mind is that there are two web servers. One is external like IIS or Apache or Linux, and there is also an internal web server hosted by your application. Requests from the external web server are passed to the internal web server and other way around. You can choose different internal web server, but most common is Kestrel since it has first-class support in ASP.NET Core. Kestrel is a lightweight web server which can only execute a request, because of which you need external web server to configure other options like security, hashing, and so on. This was a brief overview on how middleware and pipeline comes to the picture. Let me switch back to the application that we were looking at, and inside the configure method, you can see we have plugged in multiple middlewares using app and then the middleware name. We check if it is development, we want to use the developer exception page. Else we want to use just a generic error page. Then we have the HTTPS redirection middleware. We have the middleware for static files. Because of the static files middleware, we will be able to use the CSS, JavaScript, and images that we will add inside the wwwroot folder. Then we have the app.use routing, and then we have app.use authorization. Finally, we have use endpoints. With .NET Core 3, they have introduced endpoint routing in which you can configure multiple routes. We will understand why we need this, and we can configure more than one endpoints here for different technologies, which we will see in upcoming videos. But right now the main thing to consider is you can see how we are plugging in different middlewares. Now we have used the terminology middleware quite a few times, So let's actually understand what middlewares are. Now that we have seen the overview of application flow, let's understand middlewares and pipeline in much more detail. Whenever an HTTP request comes in, something must handle that request so it eventually results in an HTTP response. Those pieces of code that handles the request and results in a response make up the request pipeline. What we can do is configure this request pipeline by adding middlewares, which are software components that are assembled into an application pipeline to handle request and response. So typically a browser is going to send a request to your server, and that request is going to be interpreted by the server and handled by some piece of software. Now first, that request is attached to something called as the context object. As a part of software that manages this context, in our case it would be ASP.NET Core middleware, you can essentially think of it as a pipeline, which is a series of pipes that is going to determine what is going to happen to the context. So first the request is passed along the first pipe, and the first pipe interprets the context and checks out the request and determines if there is some type of response needed and attach that to the context. If there is no immediate response that should be handed back to the server, then the context is simply passed along to the next pipe in the pipeline. This continues again to the next piece of the middleware, whatever it might be, and it goes on till it reaches the very last pipe. Now it is also possible that at end of the pipeline, no response has been found, and that will cause a 404 not found and written back to whoever originated the request. However, it is possible that in any one or more of these middlewares, there may be a response that needs to be passed back, and it could happen in any of the pipes. So sometimes it could happen that middleware would not pass the context along the next piece, but rather says, okay, I have a response that I need to send back. But typically your context will go all the way through the pipeline to the end, where the last piece of middleware sends a response which gets back through the pipeline to the server, and then the server sends back the response to the browser. This is a very simplified version of how request works. Let me just walk you through that again in a brief overview so that this makes complete sense. When the request comes into the server then accesses the .NET Core framework and puts the request into a context object. The context gets passed along through the middlewares, and if a middleware has a response anywhere along the way, then it will attach that response to the context object and then pass that context object back through the pipeline to the server, and then the server sends back the response to the browser. Now keep in mind the order of pipeline is important. It always gets passed from the first to the last. A good example will be authentication middleware. If the middleware component finds the request isn't authorized, it will not pass it to the next piece of the middleware, but it will immediately return an unauthorized response. It is hence important that authentication middleware is added before other components that shouldn't be triggered in case of an unauthorized request. We will be adding more middlewares in our project, but we'll do them as we face the requirement for that. Another file that we have in our project is appsettings.json. All of the application settings are contained in this file, and any changes to the appsettings.json file will require restarting of the IIS administration to take effect. Let's switch back to the application and take a look at this file. So if we go here, we have the appsettings.json file. In here right now, you see we only have logging, we have log level and few other details. We will be adding more settings here for connection string. And also if you add new other details, like maybe something related to dependency, if there are some security keys or anything, you can also add them here. You can also store them remotely on a server, but AppSettings is generally a place where you have them when you're initially developing. In the future videos, we will be adding more settings here like connection strings, and we'll be accessing these variables inside the startup class file when we use dependency injection. So that's the brief overview of the AppSettings.json file. ASP.NET Core supports dependency injection software design pattern, which is a technique for achieving inversion of control between classes and their dependencies. Now you might be wondering, what is IOC or inversion of control container? IOC container is a framework for implementing automatic dependency injection. It manages object creation and its lifetime and also injects dependencies to their class. IOC container creates an object of the specified class and also injects all of the dependency objects through constructor, property, or method at runtime and disposes it at appropriate time. This is done so that we do not have to create and manage the objects manually. Support for dependency injection is built into ASP.NET Core. In ASP.NET Core, both framework services and application services can be injected into your classes rather than being tightly coupled. Dependency injection is a design pattern in which a class or object has its dependent classes injected rather than creating them directly. Dependency injection can help developers decouple the different pieces of their application. Let's try to see this with an example. We have Bob here who has been thinking about going on hiking. So he makes a list of all the supplies like maps, flashlights, protein bars, etc. and puts them in a backpack. Now next day when he goes on hiking, he takes the backpack with him. This bag acts as a container. So during the hike, whenever he needs anything, he takes it out of the container and uses them. This is the simple concept that you put items you will need in a container, and when you need them, it already exists inside a container. Let's understand this in a way that is more related to coding. Let's imagine our application have 3 pages. And in each page, we will need 3 functionalities. We need to log something, we need to send email, and we need to save something to our database. So we will need to create objects of these functions. In classic days, we'll be creating objects of email, database, and logger in the first page. Then we will do the same in the second page, and so on. But this is different with dependency injection. Let's take a look at that. With dependency injection, again we have the same 3 pages and we want the same 3 functionalities or the classes. We have a dependency injection container. What we will do is we will register all the 3 classes inside our container. Whenever any page will need anything, we will directly extract it from that container rather than creating a new object in individual pages. It is created and registered in the container. We only have to use this. This way, container deals with creating, registering, and disposing of the objects rather than creating them in every page. This is how efficient dependency injection is compared to the classic approach. Now that our project is created, in this section we will start building all the functionalities in our project. We will first add the model that we want to and push it to database. After that, we will perform CRUD operations on BookList. With that, we will complete our project with the Razor pages, and you will see how everything comes to picture. So let's get started with all of that from the next video. In this video, we will be installing our first NuGet package. So for that, let me run the application and show you why we need that package. So when you hit the run button, it will load our website, and you can see the default layout that we have. We have a home page and a privacy page. Let's go to our home Razor page and edit this text. So for that, we'll switch back to our application and we'll go to Solution Explorer. All of the pages will be inside the Pages folder. We will double click on index.cshtml, and right here, while the application is running, we will add my name, Bhrugen, here, save it, go back and refresh. You can see the refresh was successful, but the content here did not change. This was an existing feature before ASP.NET Core 3. But with 3, they have decided to add this auto refresh for the view as a separate package. So we'll stop the application, we'll go to Tools, NuGet Package Manager, and Manage NuGet Packages for solution. Inside the Browse tab, we will search for Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.MVC.Razor.Runtime compilation. We have to install this package inside our BookList Razor project. We'll accept this, and once the installation is complete, we need to make one change inside our startup.cs class file, and we have the configure services method. In here, where we have the .add Razor pages, we will have .add Razor runtime compilation. After you add this line, if you press F5 or hit the run button here, it will load the website again, and the content will be welcome Bhrugen right now. Let's see that. Perfect. Let's switch back. Let's go back to our index and remove Bhrugen. And let's refresh the page, and this time it should automatically reload and it should display welcome. Great, you can see that in action, and with this, whenever you will change anything inside the Razor UI and you come back here while the application is running and refresh, this should automatically refresh. This is one of a core package that is needed for developers, because we are many times dealing with the view, we make changes, we come back and we want to see the change rather than restarting the application. In this video, what we will do is we will be adding our first model. Now, models represents any table that you want in your database. In this project, what we want to do is we want to manage a list of books. So for that, we will add a model or a table called book. In order to do that, in our project, we'll right click, add. Let's add a new folder to separate things out, and we'll call this model. Inside here, we'll right click, add a new class file, and we'll call this book. Then in here, we will add few properties. First will be the ID. So we'll say prop, this will be an integer ID. This will be a unique key. So we can add a data annotation by typing key, and if we do control dot here, you see using system.componentModel.data annotation. What key will do is it will automatically add ID as an identity column, so that way we do not have to pass the value. It will create an ID value automatically. Along with ID, we also want name of the book. So we'll do prop, string, and name. Then we want the author. So we'll do prop again. Prop is a snippet for property. So if you type prop and hit tab twice, it will automatically create a property. We'll call this as author, and let's make it string. Now for name, I want to display book name. So for that, we have a display attribute, and we also have a required data annotation. Let's try the required first. When we do required, this means that name cannot be null. The display data annotation, I will add it as we proceed with the course. So this looks good for my book, and these three properties should be sufficient. Once we have created this book, next thing is to add this to database. For that, we have to add few packages for entity framework, and we have to set up connection string. Let's do that in the next video. Now that we have added book model inside our project, we need to set up the database. In order to set up the database, we need few packages. So we'll go to Tools, NuGet Package Manager, and Package Manager Solution. Here, the first package we want is Microsoft.EntityFramework Core. We'll select this. The version is 3.0. Looks good. Let's install this. These are all the Entity Framework packages that we are needing because we'll be using Entity Framework to access database. After this, we need .SQL Server. So we'll search for that, and we'll be using SQL Server. So we'll add this package as well. And the final package that we'll need is Entity Framework Core.Tools. And this is required because we'll be running migrations. I will explain you in the next video what exactly migrations are, so don't worry, but these are the three packages that you need. If you remove and close this, your application should have these 4 packages right now. Okay, so with this we have installed all the necessary packages. Now we need to set up our connection string. Let's go to SQL Server real quick. And in here, when you try to connect, you need a server name. The server name that you see right here, localDB in bracket, / MS SQL localDB. This is the default server name that SQL Server has. So right here, we'll use this in our connection string. So let me just go back, and the connection string that we'll be adding will be inside AppSettings.json as I explained before. So for connection string right here before logging, let me just paste that. This is what you need to write. It will be connection strings with a plural s at the end, and will set up a default connection. You can give default connection any other name that you want. Then for the server, we have the exact server name that we see inside SQL Server. Make sure this is aligned and also try to connect. Once you connect, this means that this server name is valid. After that, you can use the same server name here. Then for the database, we'll create a new database called BookList Razor. Make sure that you do not create that database automatically from SQL Server. We will be doing that using Visual Studio. So right now you see we do not have BookList Razor database here. We'll go back, we have the trusted connection true, and we have the multiple active result sets to true. I will be pasting this exact string with the lecture as well, so that you don't have to waste time to type this manually. But make sure the server name is valid with what you have. Once the connection string is in AppSettings.json, next thing we have to do is we have to configure our startup class file. And let's do the configuration and run migrations in the next video. Now that we have the connection string inside AppSettings.json, it's time to configure our configure services with Entity Framework. In order to configure that, we need an application DB context or a DB context class. So that class we can add inside Solution Explorer, Model, right click, add a new class. We'll call this class application DB context. Let's add this. Now the application DB context should inherit from DB context class, which is a class inside Microsoft.EntityFramework Core. After this, we need to implement the constructor, and we have to pass the DB context options to the parent class. So for constructor, we have a snippet called CTOR, and we'll press tab twice. Right here, we have to pass the DB context options, and in here we need the application DB context we'll call this options. This will have to pass to the base, and we'll pass the options here. This is an empty constructor, but the parameter is needed for dependency injection. Once we have that, then we need to add the book model that we added to our database. In order to add any model to the database inside the DB context, you need an entry. We will do public, and this will be DB set of type book. And let's call this property book as well. Once you add this, the last thing that you have to do is add the DB context inside startup.cs. So inside startup.cs, we have to add the DB context to our pipeline. So we'll say services.add DB context. And right here, we have to pass our class name, which is application DB context. We'll do a control dot here. And we need to pass the options with connection string. So we'll say options dot use SQL server. We'll have to do a control dot here, and the use SQL server we added as a NuGet package. In here we need to pass the connection string from our AppSettings.json. So for that we can use the configuration object that we have. So we'll just say configuration dot. In here we have the get connection string, and we need to pass the name that we used for our connection string, which is default connection. We'll copy this and we'll pass this in a string notation like this. So this was the configuration that we had to do to include entity framework inside the configuration pipeline. Once you have this, all you have to do is you need to push this to database. So for that, we'll go to Tools, NuGet Package Manager. This time we'll be going to Package Manager console. And in here, the project name, it should be BookList Razor. We'll type the command add migration, and we will add a meaningful name. What we are doing right now is add book to database or DB. We'll press enter. And what add migration will do is it will create a script that will be executed across the database. The script has been created. Right here, you see what the script is doing is it is automatically creating a table called book, and it is adding the columns ID, name, and author. It is also making sure ID nullable is false and name nullable is false. Author nullable is true because if we go, we do not have any required attribute with author. Since ID is a key, it knows that it is not nullable. In the constraint, it is also adding primary key for the table. And in the annotation, it is making sure that ID is identity column. So this is the perfect script that is needed to create the book table. Now right now, only script has been created with the add migration command. How do we actually create the database and create the table? For that, we have a command called update database. Once you hit update database, it will check if the database exists. If it does not, it will create the database, and it will also push the migrations. Once the update database command completes successfully, you can go back to your SQL server and to the database. Let's refresh it. Right now, if you expand this and go on tables, you see we have the book table that has been created, and if you do select top 1000, you will see the 3 columns. Perfect. So with this, we created our database, and we also added the book table with the properties that we wanted. Now the purpose of this course is to perform CRUD operations on this book object. So for that, we need pages to create a new book, edit a new book, delete a book, and also view all of the books that are available. So we'll go to Solution Explorer, and inside pages, we have the index page and few other pages. All of the book pages, let me add this in a new folder, and we'll call this BookList. In here, let me add a new Razor page. So what you have to do is right click, add, and we'll add a Razor page. We will go with the empty razor page because going with this will solve our problems, but we will not know what was done. So we'll go with the empty razor page and let's call this index. What are all the options here? First option is to create a page model class. As you saw with the index page here, we have index page as well as page model. We need a page model class because we need to populate all of the books from the database and pass that to the page to display it. So that's why we'll need that. Then this won't be a partial view. A partial view is something which is a small subsection, like maybe group of buttons that you want to reuse in multiple places in your website. But this is a complete page, so that won't be a partial view. And we will use our layout page because that is the master page and we want to be consistent. So with this, let's add this. One drawback that I see with the razor pages is when we will be adding index pages, it might get confusing because you see we have a master index page, inside BookList we have another index page. So whenever you are working, make sure you are working on the correct index page. At this time, we'll be working on index and index page model inside the book list. So if you have any other pages open, you can close them. Inside the index page, what we want to do is we want to retrieve all of the books from the database. So for that, we need the application DB context. Whenever you have to deal with the database, you will need the application DB context. When you added the application DB context right here in the services, that means that you have added it to the pipeline. Once you have added it as a pipeline, you can use them using dependency injection. So we need an object of application DB context. What you will do is you'll say private read only application DB context, and let's call this _DB. Now we need to initiate our constructor. So we'll type CTOR tab, and right here we will get the application DB context DB. This application DB context we are getting using dependency injection. So right here we'll say _DB is equal to DB. This way you can extract the application DB context that is inside the dependency injection container and inject it onto this page. If you did not have dependency injection, what you would have to do is you would have to create a new object, and then once you are done with that, you'll have to dispose that and all the other things. With dependency injection, you do not have to worry about anything. Now what we want to do is we want to return a list or an IEnumerable of book. So we'll say public IEnumerable of book. Let's call this books. We'll have the getter and setter. What we will do is we'll assign this books all of the books from the database. How do we get that? It's very simple because we're using entity framework. We'll use await here and we'll say _DB dot books. You can see it already has the book, and we have a method here which is toList, and we'll call the async method. We'll have to do a control dot for the async to use entity framework core. Now when you are using async and await rather than void, you will have to use async task. What we are doing here is we are going to database and retrieving all of the books, storing that inside the IEnumerable, and we are doing that inside the get handler. So when we go inside the view here, we will already have the list of books available to display. All you did was right here, you extracted that and it is already available inside your view to display. Now one thing to notice is right now I'm using await and async. What async does, this is a basic C# explanation and not related to .NET Core, so I won't be going into much details, but async will basically let you run multiple tasks at a time until it is awaited. Right here we need to await because we need to assign all the books that we found. But the method that we have is also async and task. So this was all you had to do for the get handler. Again, if it was MVC, this would be action methods. But with Razor pages inside the page model, we have handlers. In the next video, let's write some code here and see the list of books. Now that we have added the getHandler method for the index page inside BookList, it's time to add some UI. Here, the first thing we'll do is we'll go to Solution Explorer and we'll go to our master page, which is _ layout. We have home and privacy. Let me add a book tab in place of privacy. And for that, we have to change the ASP page. So for that, rather than privacy, we will have BookList /index. And if you save this, let's run our application. Once you click on this, it should load the index page. In order to see the difference, you have to go here and let me type index book, save this, and let's click on the book. Perfect, you can see the page is loaded. So with this, you can see inside _ layout how you had to manipulate the routing for the ASP page tag helpers. If you want to access something inside the book list, you have to write the book list name followed by the page that we have, which is the index page. Then we can keep this application running. We can go to index and we'll design this. So we'll just remove this. Let me add BR. Then let me just remove this index and we'll start designing this page. We also do not need the view data. We can remove that. We'll add a BR and we'll add a div, give it a class of container. These are the bootstrap classes, row, padding 0 and margin 0. Within this first container, I'll add a div, give it a class of column 10. And I'll also add another div, give it a class of column 2. If you are not familiar with Bootstrap, Bootstrap divides a row into 12 equal columns. So that's why I'm dividing one column inside two separate columns. First will occupy 10 columns and the next one will be the rest 2 columns. Inside here, I'll use h2, give it a Bootstrap class of text info for a bluish color, and we'll display book list. In here, we will add an anchor tag and we'll give it a class of btn, btn info, and form control. These are all Bootstrap classes and we'll say create new book. Let's save this. Let's go back and refresh the page. Perfect, this is coming along good. Let me increase the size here so we can do column 3 and we'll have to make it column 9. Perfect, this is good. We'll just make it text white here. So right here we can do text white. Okay, this looks good. Now what we want to do is we want to display a table with all of the books. Let's continue working on the designing in the next video. Let's continue working on the designing. Right now we have the create new book, but when we click, nothing happens, and that is because we have not used any tag helpers on where it should redirect. We'll do that in a while. After this column 9 and column 3, let me add another div, give it a class of column 12. We'll give it a border, padding 3 and margin top of 3, all Bootstrap classes. And we'll add a form here, give it a method of post. Within this form, we want to display this only if books exist inside the table. So we can use Razor syntax here, like if-else condition. For that, you need @, and then you can use C# syntax like if. And we want to check if there are any books that are returned from this get method. You can see inside the page model, we have the I enumerable as book. So inside the Razor page, you can say model with a capital M dot. Right here, you can see books is available. This is the same books that is being passed from the get handler right here. So we can check if model.books.count If this is greater than 0, then we will display a table. Else we will display a paragraph and say no books available. Let's save this. Let's go back and refresh, and we should see no books available. Now, in order to see some books, right now we do not have the create book page. So let's go to database and hack some things. We'll right click on the book, edit top 100. Let me do 1 and any of the dummy record. We'll come back here and we'll refresh, and that message is gone. And that is because it retrieved one book that we just added. So how do we display that? Right here, we will have to add a table inside the if condition. So we'll add table, give it bootstrap classes of table, table striped, and border. Within here, we'll add a tr, give it a class of table secondary, and we will add a th for the table heading. Here we will use the label tag helper, and the tag helper we have is ASP4. We will go to our books, and in here we want the first.default because the label we want for only one record, and we'll say .name. So this is how you can use tag helper. You can also use HTML helper for the same thing. Let me show you that for the author. So the syntax for HTML helper was pretty weird. So it was html.displayNameFor, and in here you'll have to use the lambda expression m goes to m.books.first.default.author. Now you can see how tag helpers have made this extremely simple. It is the existing label tag. All you did was add ASP4. So that's why tag helpers are preferred over HTML helpers, but HTML helpers are still there for some functionalities which you have to write custom tag helpers for. And I will show you that in just a while. Once you have this, let me add a th here, and I will comment this code out, but I will leave there for reference. I'll copy this and paste it here for author. So this was the table header. We will add an empty th tag. After this, we want all of the records. So for that, we need a for each loop. How do we get a for each loop inside the view? Again, the answer is @. And then we have the for each, which is a C# syntax. We'll say variable item in model with a capital M dot books. So for all of the books that we have, we will have item, and we will display a table row here. So we will add a tr tag, and inside the td, we want to display the value. Now in this case, we do not have a tag helper, but we have an HTML helper. The HTML helper is html.displayFor. In here, we'll have to use link m goes to item dot. We want to display the name. We do not have an equivalent tag helper for displayFor. Of course, you can write a custom tag helper that can do the exact same thing, but that is beyond the scope for this project. So we can just use the HTML helper. We can copy this and we'll paste it again for author. Let me save this. Let's go back and refresh, and we should see our record. Perfect. This was so easy. Now this is not aligned, so we can do Control A, Control KD to align everything that we have. Last thing that I want is in here, I want buttons to edit or delete a book. So after this TD, I will add another TD, and I will give button, give it a class of btn, btn danger, and btn small. These are all bootstrap classes, and I will display delete. After the delete button, we need a link to redirect to the edit page. So for that, we'll use the anchor tag, and we'll give it a class of btn, btn success, and we'll do btn small. Here, this will be edit. Let me save this and refresh, And great, this is good. We will not worry about designing much things here, but this looks good. In delete, I'll just do text white so that it is aligned with the delete. So with this, we have almost completed the index page, but we will come back here later. Now, the last thing that I want to do on index page for this video is on create book. I want to add a link so that it redirects me to a create razor page. So for that, right here inside the create new book, you will need a tag helper. The tag helper we have seen before in underscore layout. It is ASP page. What page do we want to redirect to? That will be a create page. Now you do not have to mention here that the create page will be inside BookList, because if you are in the same folder, you can directly write the page name. That being said, let's add the create page in the next video. In this video, we will be adding the create razor page. So let me stop the application. We'll go to Solution Explorer. Inside the BookList, we'll right click, add a razor page. Again, it will be the basic one, and we'll say create here. It won't be a partial view. Let's add this. Now with the create page, when the page will be loaded, do we want to display any data? No, we just want to display text box so user can enter a book name and an author. So for that, right here, we will again need the application DB context, not for the get handler, but when we hit the create button, we need to save it to our database. So we will just do that while we are here. So we'll say private read only application DB context. We'll do a control dot to add model, and we'll have underscore DB. We need constructor, so CTOR tab. We'll get the application DB context DB, and underscore DB is equal to DB. Now inside the get method, we need to display text boxes to write the author name and the book name. What will be the model? So that will be public book. Let me call that book. We'll have the getter and setter. On get, we do not have to write that we'll be passing this empty book object. It does that automatically. So inside the create view, you will be able to access this book and display labels as well as text boxes. Before we do that in the next video, many times it's a common situation that you start with a model and then you feel, no, I need one more property. Or they are like, oops, I need to rename this. So for that, what we will do is right here, let's imagine we have to add a new property called ISBN. So we'll write the new property ISBN, and let's have a getter and setter. Once you add a property, since you change something in the model here, you have to add a new migration. So we'll go to Tools, NuGet Package Manager console. We'll write add migration, add ISBN to book model. Always try to name your migration as meaningful as possible. Perfect, you can see it is adding a new column, and all you do is update database. So this way inside your table, a new column will be added. If you go back now, and if you do select top 1000, you can see ISBN has been added, which is null. This looks great, and now we know how we can make changes to a model that we have already added. We'll have to change our index for the same. I'll just copy this and paste it one more time. I'll remove the display for. Here we'll have the ISBN, and we'll do the same for HTML helper. Perfect. So these are all the changes that were needed. In the next video, let's design the create page and see everything in action. In this video, we will start designing the create razor page. We will remove all of these things. We'll add a BR. We'll give it a heading here, give it a class of text info, and let me display create new book. followed by a BR. Now let me just paste some bootstrap styling that we have. I'll align this. All I did was I added a div, give it a class of border and container, and some style with padding. Then I added a form, and in that form I have a div with class of form group and row, and inside that row I have divided this into two parts, column 2 and column 6. Let me make it column 4 and column 6. That should be okay. Even though the total should add up to 12, you can leave it like this. Once you have the same designing, what we will do is within the form, we will add a method of post, because when we hit the create button, we will be posting data back to our page handler. Within the column 4, we want to display label. So we'll do label and ASP4. This will be for book. We have the name. After that we have column 6. Here we want a text box, so we'll say input. We'll use the tag helper ASP4. This is for book.name, and we'll give it a class of form control. You can see how easy the binding is with the tag helpers. You do not need to worry about anything in the post. Book.name will have the value that user enters inside this text box. So let me just copy this and paste this 2 more times. We have author and we have ISBN. After author and ISBN, we will add another div, give it a class of form group and row, just like we did before. And we'll add a div, give it a class of column 3, offset of 2. Let me do column 6, offset of 4. That's what we have. And we'll add a div, give it a class of column 4. This should be column 3. And this will be column 3. This is because the 6 that we have, we are dividing that into 2 columns again. The first one will be an input, and this will be type of submit for the button, and we'll give it a value of create, give it some bootstrap classes of btn, btn primary, and form control. The other one is to go back to the index page, so we'll use the anchor tag, and the tag helper ASP page will take us back to the index page, and the classes will be btn, btn success, and form control. We'll display back to list. Let me save this and run our project. We'll go to our book, and this time we'll hit create new book. Great, you can see how good the page is coming along. If you think the size is too big here, you can always modify that. I'll change this to 3 in all the places, and that way it will be more closer. Offset will also be 3. Let's save this. And perfect, looks much better. Now if you click on back to list, it works, and on create, we need to work on what will happen when we hit the submit button. Right now, if you do that, nothing happens. And that is because inside the create page model, we do not have a post handler. So let's see how we can add a post handler so that whenever they submit anything from the page, how do we get the data and save that inside our database? In this video, we need to make sure when we fill all of this information and hit the create button, it takes us back to the page. But before that, we need some validation. As you know, name was a required property. So if you hit create before pressing the name, we want to see the error message right here. We'll do all of that. Let's stop the application and let's go to the page model. Right here, we have the onGet handler. But when we hit the submit button, we will be posting data. So for that, we need a post handler to retrieve that. So we'll create public async and task. This task will be of iAction result because we'll be redirecting to a new page. And the handler name will always start with on. And what is the handler name? We want a post handler, so it will be on post. When this will be posted, what will be passed from this Razor page? We will be passing a book object. So for that, we'll retrieve a book object and we'll call this book obj. Now, rather than getting a book object like this, we already have a book right here. We can use the exact same property. Rather than writing this, ASP.NET Core team has given a property binding here where you have to write bind property. Once you bind the property, it is automatically assumed that on the post, you will be getting this book right here. So that way, all you have to do is right here, you can check if model state dot is valid, then proceed further. Else, if it is invalid, we want to return back to the page. I'll explain you what model state is, but hang with me right now. If the model state is valid, we want to add the book to database. Adding that is really simple. We can use the _db. In here, we have the book and we have an add async right here. What is the parameter? We want to add the book. We just do await here and this will work. After we add the book, we need to save changes to the database. Right now, this book has not been added to the database. It is just added to a queue, which will be eventually pushed to the database when we type the command _db.savechanges asynchronously. Only when this command is executed, then the data will be pushed to the database. And once the changes are pushed to the database, all that is remaining is return. We will redirect to a page, and that page will be the index page. This looks good. Let's run our application and see this in action. So we'll go to book. We'll try to create a new book, and let's hit the create button. Great, you can see the book has been created. Now let's try to create a new book and hit the create button. You see, nothing happens. If you type name here and hit create, it gets created. But if you try it without name, it won't be created. And that is because name is a required property. What is actually happening is if we add a debugger here, and if we go back and try to hit the create button, the control goes back here, and let me add few more debuggers, hit continue. The model state, if you hover, is invalid. What is not valid? If you go on model state, you will have to go to result view, and right here you will see the name is invalid. And the reason it is invalid is it is a required property and you are not passing any value. But we need some error messages to see that it is actually an error. In order to do that, let me hit continue and we go back. Inside the view here, we need to add a div. We'll add a div, give it a class of text danger. This will be a red color, and there is a special tag helper ASP validation summary. We'll change this to model only. Once we have this, what we need is we want to display individual error. So we'll add span here, and we have ASP validation for tag helper. Here we want the validation for book.name. We'll give it a class of text danger. We can copy this. We'll do the same for author and ISBN. Once you do this, if you save this, go back and refresh the page. The control comes back here. Let's hit the continue. Whoops, I think there are some changes. We'll just stop this, remove the debugger now, and let's just run the application again. This time, if we go to book, and if we try to create new book, hit the create button, you can see the error message comes right up. I need to show one more thing here. Let me show you that in the next video. Now we see the error message, but there is one more issue. If you go back to the application while it's running, let's add a debugger here in the model state and hit the create button again. You can see that the control is going to the onPost handler. It finds the model state is invalid and it returns back with the error. We want this to be done on the client side. In order to do that, if we switch back, we go to create. Right here inside Solution Explorer, we have the validation scripts partial. All we have to do is we need their reference. So right here, we'll do add section. This will be scripts. And right here, we will use partial tag helper name. We will paste the name. This name will be exactly same as validation scripts partial. Make sure there is no spelling mistake. We'll save this. Let's go back to the home page. Let me do Control F5 for hard refresh. Let's try to create again. And let's make it empty. Hit the create button. You see the error message pops up. It doesn't go back. And to confirm, if we go back, we still have our debugger. So this means the validation here is done on the client side without posting back. So that way we have both the validation server side as well as client side. So this was one way I wanted to show you that the validation should be done both client side as well as server side. Now the create is completed. In the next video, let's start working on the edit functionality. Now we will be working on the edit razor page. So while this is running, if we can go back and we go to our index, if we scroll down where we have the edit, in here we need to pass the routing. So the ASP page, this will be the edit page which we will create. Now whenever any user clicks on the edit button, we want to pass the ID of the field that they are editing. In this case, it will be ID of the book. So in order to pass that, we have another tag helper, and that is ASP. We have route, and then we need to define the name that we want. We can just call this as ID. What we want to pass here is the actual ID of the book, which is inside at item.id. This way, when a user clicks on edit, it will go to the edit razor page and it will also pass ID as the parameter. Let me save this. Let me stop this. Let's go back inside the pages book list. Let's add a new razor page called as edit. Perfect. In the get handler, we will get a parameter of ID that we just pass. It will be an integer. Based on this integer, we will retrieve the book. We can use bind property, and we can start first with private application DB context because we'll have to update things. We'll do CTOR constructor. We'll have the application DB context DB underscore DB is equal to DB. Great. Then we need to bind property. In here, we'll be working with just one book. So we'll do public book. Let's call this book. We'll have the getter and setter. Here we need to populate this book object based on the database with the ID that we received. So await, we'll do underscore DB dot book dot find async. And here we just need to pass the ID. This is another method that we have with our entity framework. Rather than void, this will be async and task because we are using await here. This looks good for our get method. In the next video, let's design the edit view and continue working on posting or editing a book. Now we will be working on editing the book UI. The UI will look similar to what we have for create, but the only difference will be the data will be loaded. So we can go to create.cshtml and we can copy everything right here. Do not copy the model because model will be different. So right here, we'll remove everything and we'll paste what we just copied. Rather than create new book, it will be edit book. Then if you scroll down, we have submit here. The value will be update and index. This looks good. Let's run our application and see the edit page. Here we'll go to book and we'll hit the edit button. Great, you can see the data is loaded, it's edit book, and we have the update button. If you try to hit update, nothing happens because we have not added the post handler. Also in the URL, you see the ID is being passed. And this is the ASP route ID that we added. So everything is coming along good. In the next video, let's work on the post handler. In this video, we'll be working on the update button. If we close this here, inside the edit, you see the form method is post and we have the input type submit. So on post, we need to write a post handler. In post handler, we'll be redirecting to page. So that's why the return type will change that to iActionResult. So task of iActionResult, and we'll call this on post. The first thing we'll check here is if model state is valid. If this is valid, then we will proceed further and we'll retrieve the book from the database because we have to edit this. Now updating can be done in multiple ways. So one of the way is we'll retrieve that from db is equal to, we'll say await _db.book.findAsync and we'll pass the book.id. We have the book object right here. We'll retrieve it and pass the ID and we'll say book from db.name is equal to book.name. We can just copy this and paste this 2 more times for ISBN and author. We'll copy the same here. Perfect. Once we change this, we will say await _db.savechanges asynchronous, and this will update the book object inside the database. Once we update this, we'll return redirect to page, and we want to redirect to the index page. If the model state is not valid, we will return and redirect back to page. Now let's see this in action, and when we try to run this, we'll hit into an error. I want to show you that error message before I show you the solution. We go to book here. Let's try to edit this and we'll change the ISBN to 333. Great, we see an error message here that object reference is not set to an instance of an object. This is a common error message and it is not self-explanatory. It just says that the object it was expecting a value, but it is a null value. Now we have to debug on what's going on. So we'll add a debugger inside the model state, variable, and right here. Let's go back and we'll go back here and hit the update button. Okay, we'll see the model state is valid. Let's continue. We'll see the book object and you see the ID is not present. We have all the other values. The ISBN is the updated one, but the ID is missing. And the reason behind that is if we hit continue here, let me remove the debuggers, hit continue again, we'll get the error, that's okay. Inside the edit, we do not have the ID here. We have name right here, author, and ISBN. We need the ID property inside a hidden field. So we'll do input type is equal to hidden, and we need the ASP for tag helper for the ID. So it will be book.id. Once you have it, and save it, and if you go back, let's go back here and let's do a hard refresh and update the value. This time it is updated because it finds the ID now. So always make sure that inside edit and such fields you have the ID or any other properties that you want while updating must be present in the hidden property if you do not have that inside the input text box. Also, if you go on edit, we already have our validations, so if you try to update, it gives the error message. So with this we have completed create and edit. Let's work on delete. In this video we'll be implementing the delete. Now with delete you can do it the same way we did for edit and create. You can create a new view where you'll display the details, and on the delete button you can do a post event, but I want to try something new here. This time when we hit delete, I want to show an alert, and when the user clicks OK, I want to delete it directly from the index page. So for that, let's implement the pop-up first. We'll go back, I'll close edit, create, and we have the index. Right here, we have the delete button. I will add a onClick method here, and we will say return. We'll have a confirm box. Are you sure you want to delete? If this returns true, we want to go to a page handler on the same index page. So we'll do ASP page and we'll have a handler. We have not used this tag helper before. This time we want to implement a custom tag helper other than the onGet and onPost. We want to call this as delete. And when we'll be deleting, we need to pass the ID of the book. We already know how to pass it using ASP route. We'll call it ID and we'll pass item.id. Let's save this. Let's go back and refresh. And when we hit the delete, we now see an alert here. On cancel, nothing happens. What should happen when they click OK? We have to implement a delete handler inside the index page. So inside Solution Explorer, we'll open the page model. Let me stop it here. And we will implement public async task of I action result because we'll be redirecting to the same page, and we'll implement on post delete. We'll have an integer of ID that we will fetch because on the index we have the ID. This is a button, so that's why it will be a post handler. So we will have the onPost and then the handler name, which we have defined as delete. Okay, so what we want to do in here, we'll say variable book is equal to, we can do it in multiple ways. First, we can find the book. So we'll do await underscore db.book.find async, and we'll pass the ID. Then we'll check if book is equal to null. That means that book does not exist based on the ID that is passed, and we'll return not found. If we find the book, we'll say underscore db.book.remove. In here, we'll pass the book that we retrieved, and we need to save the changes. So await underscore db.save changes async. Once we remove the book, we'll return back to the page, or we can return back to the index page, making it reload. Let's save this and let's run our application. We'll go to book. Let's try to delete this 111. And perfect. You can see our delete functionality is working as expected. So with this, we have completed the CRUD operations on BookList using Razor syntax. Now we have implemented the CRUD functionalities that we seen before. These CRUD functionalities are basic HTML and .NET Core. How about we add some styling and some data tables to that? So for that, I'll be needing three things. First will be Sweet Alert, because of which we'll be having such nice alerts. Then we have toasters for notifications like this, and we'll be using data tables to list all the books in such a fashionable way. There are CDNs that are needed for that. What I will do is I will have a file attached with the CSS and the JavaScript. So you can just copy this, go back to your code. We'll stop it. We'll have to go to _layout. On top, we have the CSS. We'll paste it here for data tables, jQuery UI, and toaster. And we'll also copy the JS. And we'll scroll down to the JavaScripts and we'll paste it right here. Now with data tables, we need to add API calls to retrieve all of the books in a JSON format. And we'll also add an API call for delete. In order to add API calls, we need to add Web API to our project. Right now, it's only Razor. So for that, we'll right click, add a new folder. Let's call this controllers. I'll make it plural here, controllers. We'll right click, add a new controller in here. We can go with the MVC controller or the API controller. Anyone is fine. We'll just go with the MVC controller and we'll call this book controller. Inside the book controller, we will need our application DB context. So right here, we'll have private read only application DB context. We'll do a control dot underscore DB. We'll have the constructor application DB context DB and underscore DB is equal to DB. Then we need to implement the HTTP get and the HTTP delete. Let's just implement the HTTP get. We'll change this to get all. And with the get, it should be HTTP get. What we want to do is we want to return a JSON here. And we'll say new. We want to pass data is equal to underscore DB dot book dot to list. So that way we'll retrieve the book and we'll pass it back when you call this API call. But APIs are not supported inside our startup right now. What we have right now is only add Razor pages. So in order to do that, we'll do services dot add controller with views. Once you add this, you'll be adding the API calls. We will also have to add that to our middleware, especially inside the endpoints. So we'll use endpoints.mapControllers. This way, the controller APIs will be called. And right here, we need to define the route that should be used to call this. So the route we'll just call is API /book, and this will be an API controller. So that way we'll make sure that the book controller is an API controller, and this is the route that will be used. Inside startup, since we have added map controller, you can navigate to this URL and get request will return you data from here. In this video, we'll be making changes to the index page that is inside pages BookList index. And right here, we have the first div that we are using right now. I will add another div here. Let me just paste it. And all we are doing here is column 12. We have an OR and I have a div with column 12. I have a table with ID of DT load. This is important. And I'm just displaying the table headers. I think I have an extra div here. There we go. Now, how do we load this table? That table will be loaded using JavaScript. So for that, we'll add a section here and it will be scripts. We will have the script tag here. We'll give src. Inside JS, I will create a new JavaScript called booklist.js. Let's add that script file. inside the wwwroot JS, we'll add a new item. We can search for Java here, and let's call this BookList. And then let's start working on the JavaScript here. So we'll have the variable data table here, and we'll use the $document.ready function. We'll add a function in here, and we'll call load data table. Let's add this load data table, so we can just copy this, and we'll add a function here, paste that. And what we want to do here is we'll load the variable data table. We want to load it on index. We have the dt load. We can copy this. We'll retrieve that hash and dt load dot we will call data table. This data table has been included with the JavaScript reference that you added with DataTables. So .data table will populate a data table on dt load. In here we have few things. We need to make an AJAX call to our API. So for that, right here we need to define the URL, and URL is /API/book. Then we need a type here because this will be a GET request, followed by data type, and data type will be JSON. After the AJAX call, we need to define all the columns that we have to display. So right here we will have columns, and this will be an array. So right here, the first one will do data, and what is the name of the column? That is name itself, comma, we want to say what width it should occupy, so that will be in percentage, so we can do 30%. We can copy this and paste it 2 more times. We have author here, and we have ISBN. Make sure it follows camel casing. If inside book the variable you had is name, right here you had name ABC, then what you would do is right here, this will be name ABC. The first one should be a lowercase. We only have name, so everything is lowercase right here. After this, the last column we want is edit and delete buttons. So in the last one, the data field that we want is the ID, because when we edit or delete, we need to pass the ID of the book. So we'll have ID here, and we will have a render because we want to render 2 buttons here. So this will be a function, and we will pass the ID. So that's why we'll pass the data which has the ID. In here, what we want to do is we want to return a div with 2 buttons. Since this will be a multi-line statement, we can use the tilde sign and break up the statements. Tilde sign is available right next to the one on your keyboard. Here we'll start with div, give it a class of text center, and we'll add the ending div. Since there is no IntelliSense, you have to do this manually. Then you'll have an anchor tag. We'll do href. What we want to do is we want to add an edit page, and right here we will have BookList /edit, and we need to pass the ID. So ID is equal to $, and in here we have the data. So that way we'll be passing the data which has the ID of the book. We'll give it a classes of btn success, and text white. We will also give it a style of cursor of pointer, and we'll give it a width of 100 pixels. This looks good for our anchor tag, and then in the next line we will add the edit button. We will close the anchor tag here, and we can copy this anchor tag because we want another one for delete. So right here I'll add some space, ampersand and BSP, and we'll paste it one more time. On delete, we do not want to go to any of the URL, so we'll leave the href out right now. We'll have the classes of PT and danger, and we'll add an onClick, but we'll do that later. I'll just make it delete, and we'll have the closing div. So this looks good. Then in this render, we will add width here, and we'll make it 30%. Outside of this array that we had for columns, we'll do comma, and I will add language here. In here, I'll do empty tables. If there is no data, I want to display no data found. We'll do a comma here, and we'll give it a width of 100%. Everything should be in double quotes like this. So with this, we have our data table in place. Let me save this, and we need to run our application to see this in action. We already added the code inside the index page. So if we go on book, we will see two tables now. The first one you can see right here, and here is the later one. But here the JavaScript is not getting called. And I guess that's because we have a mistake with the file name here. It should be BookList JavaScript. Let's enter that and hit the run button again. We go on book, and great, we see our data table in place with the number of entries. We have pagination, sorting, and search by default. Here the stylings has not been applied. Let me go back and take a look. We forgot an equal to here. Let's save this, go back and refresh, and perfect. We see everything is coming along. Let me just reduce the size here. I'll make it 20. And we can make this 40. And width, let me make it 70 pixels in both the places. Let's save it and refresh, and perfect. This looks much aligned. When you hit the edit, it will take you to the edit page, and if you click on delete, right now nothing happens. In this video, let's work on the delete. On delete, we want to display a nice alert here, and on OK, we want to delete it directly, but using an API call. So for that, we'll have to go back and we'll have to add an API call inside our book controller. So we will add an HTTP delete here, and this will be public iActionResult delete. Here we'll be getting an ID that we have to delete. We'll say variable book from DB is equal to _db dot book dot first dot default, and we can say u goes to u.id is equal to id. Now right here, it is always good to be consistent, so we will do async, and it will be task of iActionResult, and we will do await here, and we have the toList async. We'll have to do a control dot to include entity framework core. First our default, we have the async method in here, so we'll do control dot, oops, there we go, and we'll use await. We have async task of iActionResult. Then we'll check here if book from DB is equal to null. In this case, we will return JSON, and we'll return new. This time we want to make sure success is false because we did not receive any book, comma, will also display a message, error while deleting. If we found that book, we'll say _db dot book dot remove, and we'll say await _db dot save changes asynchronous. Then we will return back the JSON. This time we'll have a new and success will be true, and we'll have a message which will be delete successful. So this looks good. Here we are getting an error. Let's do a control dot. Whoops, and that is because we did not pass the object that we had to remove, which is book from DB. Perfect, so the delete method looks good. All we have to do is inside the JavaScript, we need to add a function to delete. Let's do that in the next video. In this video, we'll be adding a function to delete and call our API. So right here where we have the delete tag, we will add an onClick method. So right here, we will say onClick is equal to, let's call a function delete, and we'll pass our API call here. So we'll have API book, and then we need to pass the ID is equal to, we'll do plus, and we have the $data. And then at the end, we will be adding the delete function. So we'll add function delete, we'll receive the URL here, and we need to display sweet alert. So we'll do SWAL, and we'll add the properties like title, are you sure, comma, we will have text, once deleted, you will not be able to recover. We can have an icon here of warning, and we can have a danger mode here to true. These are just some of the properties that you can use, and we'll be using Ajax here, so we'll use then, and in here we'll say we'll delete. This will be the response. Based on this, we'll have a function. Here we'll check if we'll delete. That means if user selected yes, they want to delete, we will make an Ajax call here. Ajax call will have the type of delete. We will have the URL, which we have right here inside the parameters. We'll do a comma. On success, what we want to do is we want a function with data that we retrieved, and we want to display a toaster notification. So we will do toaster dot. We have the success here, and we want to display message. Inside here, I need a if condition, and we'll check if this is success or not. If this is successful, we'll display toaster.message, and we will say data table. This should be message. And that is because if we go to controller, we have message right here. And then we'll do data table.ajax.reload. In the else block here, we want to display an error. So I can copy this and paste it. And this will be error. This looks good. We'll add the 2 semicolon. And now let's run our application. We'll go to book. Let's try to delete. Great. We see the notification here. You can click outside or you can hit the delete. And if we hit delete here, it doesn't do anything, but actually if you refresh, the data is deleted. We have some issues with the display. So right here, let's see the toaster. This should not be message, it should be data.message because we have that inside the data object. And also if you go to book controller, I have a mistake with success spelling here. Let's run it and see everything in action. Let's go to book and create new book. Let's hit the delete. Okay, great. We see a nice toaster notification. And then if we just scroll back, inside the sweet alert, I will add another property here. Buttons is equal to true. And after that, if we go back and we go to book, create new, let's add one. create, and then if we click delete, we see OK and cancel. So that way we have everything working. Now here I have had request from student many times that the create view will look similar to what we have for our edit. So why not combine both of them in one view or one razor page? So that can be done absolutely. Let me stop the application and I'll show you how that is possible. Usually the name for such page is Upsert because it is a combination of update and insert. So we can just copy the edit that we have, or let me just add a new view, because when we copy, we have to make sure many things needs to be updated, like model. So the page name, it will be Upsert, and this looks good. Let's add that inside our book list. It will be similar to edit page, but there will be modifications. Let's first copy everything that we have inside edit, not the model. So we'll copy this and we'll close that. We'll go to our Upsert page and we'll paste it right here. Let's save this. Let's go to the edit page model and we'll copy everything inside the model from application DB context, and we'll just leave 2 brackets at the end. Whoops. We'll start after the 2 brackets, and there we go. Let's copy this. Let's close this, go to the Upsert, and let's remove this and paste it right here. Now what will happen within Upsert is it will be used for creating as well as updating. We'll do control dot here, because of which inside the edit model, this will be Upsert model actually, and because of which the ID, it is possible there won't be any ID if this is used for create. So that's why we have to use a nullable integer so that ID can be null. Then inside the get, what we have to do is we'll say book is equal to new book. Once we have that, we'll check here if ID is equal to null. If ID is null, that means that this is for create. So we will return back to the page. If that is not null, we will continue here. Because of this, we need to change from task to iActionResult. If the ID is not null, that means we have to retrieve the book from the database. So book is equal to _db.book.first.default async. We'll have to do control dot to include entity framework core. We'll do await here, and we'll say u goes to u.id is equal to the ID. We will find the book, and after we find this, we'll check if, and we'll say book is equal to null. If that is true, then we'll return not found. If this is not the case, we will return back to the page. Now when we are retrieving from the database, you can use first.default async, or you can use find async. Any of those methods would work. So this way we will handle it for both create. This will be for create, and with this will be for update. So the same handler will be using for both the scenarios. That looks good for the get handler. Then inside the post handler, we will do the same. We will check first if the model state is valid or not. If it's not valid, we'll return back. Then if it is valid, what we will do is right here, we'll check if book.id is equal to 0. If this is true, then _db.book.add, and we'll add book. Else what we will do is _db.book. We also have update method. In here, we'll pass the book. So previously you saw other way of updating the book by retrieving it from the database, and here we're using directly the update method. So when should you use the previous one versus this one? This update should be used if you want to update every property of the book. But if you only want to update 2 properties, we will use the way that we used inside the edit page. Once we do this, we'll save the changes and we'll redirect back to the page. So perfect, this looks good for our Upsert Get as well as Post handlers. In the next video, let's fix the update view or the Razor page and we should be good. In the last video, we fixed the handlers for Upsert. In this video, let's work on the Razor page. The things that we have to do differently in create and edit is the title here. So in here, we can use the Razor syntax and we can check if model.book.id does not equal to 0. If this is true, we will display edit, else we will display create. We will copy this condition and we will have to do the same for the ID in the hidden property. We'll add if model.book.id does not equal to 0, then we will have the ID, else we do not need it in the create. Lastly, if you scroll down, we need to do the same for the button. So inside the input type, we can just replace this with button. We can say type is equal to submit, and we can add the same classes btn primary, form control, and we'll paste what we had before for @model. So if this is not null, then we will display as update, else we will display create. Let's save this, and with this the Upsert View or the Razor page looks good. How do we test this? We can go to our booklist.js, and if we scroll up, so we'll change this to Upsert here, and we'll also change the create. So for that, we'll have to go to the index, and then if we scroll up, right here, we'll change this to Upsert. Let's save this and run our application. And right here, we'll go to book and hit create new book. We are on the Upsert. Let's try to create one book. Great, this worked. And if we click on the edit here, it takes us to the Upsert. Let's try to update this. Perfect, that is working. If we click on edit in the first one, it takes you to the edit page. Here we can also add a new text box so that we'll have both of them. So I can just copy this and paste it one more time. Next will be create and create new book, add Upsert. Whoops, I think I switched that around. Let me paste this. We'll save this, go back and refresh. I have one more thing. I'll have to change this to 6. And perfect. Now we see create new book takes us to create, add Upsert takes you to the Upsert, but everything is exactly the same. So with this, we complete the Upsert and how you can combine both of the logic inside a single Razor page. Now that we have completed Razor project, it's time to explore the other type of application, which is an MVC project. So in this section, we'll create our next project, which will be the book list, but in that we will use MVC. We will take a look at how routing is different in MVC as compared to Razor pages, and we'll see the new folders with the MVC project. So let's get started with that from the next video. What we have to do is we need to create project for our MVC CRUD operation. We'll start Visual Studio 2019 and we'll select create a new project. In here, we'll select ASP.NET Core Web Application and hit the next button. Then we need a name of our project, so we'll call it BookList MVC and you'll select a location. I'll change the location to where I want and I'll hit the create button. That being said, we need to select options for our project. Now in here, we'll select ASP.NET Core 3.1 and we'll be selecting MVC for our project. We can change the authentication to select individual user's account, But with that, many things comes configured, so I do not want to start with that route. We'll go with no authentication and we'll add database objects manually. That way we will learn those concepts. That being said, once everything is aligned here, let's hit the create button. Perfect. So with this, the project has been created with model, views and controller, and this is slightly different to what we have seen with Razor pages. As we saw from the architecture, we will have controllers which will have the logic, models will have the data, and view will be the UI component. So we have all of those three folders right here, and the other things are common like wwwroot, dependencies, properties, AppSettings, program.cs, and startup.cs. The only difference is inside startup.cs class file, if you scroll down, inside configure services, we do not have the add Razor pages, we have add controllers with views. Also, if you scroll down, route here, inside the routing and endpoints, they have registered map controller route because we need controller, actions, and even areas in advanced courses. So these are the only differences between MVC and Razor pages inside the setup files. Of course, the working of controller, models, and views is completely different, and we'll understand that in the upcoming videos. In this video, let's take a look at the folder structure in an MVC project. The three main folders that are different are model, views, and controller right here. The first folder is the controllers folder, and in here we have the main logic of our web application. Here we have the home controller. One rule that we have is the controller name will be home and it should match exactly with the folder inside the view. So if we have the views for home page, the controller name will be home followed by a controller keyword. Inside the home controller, you can see we have methods here, and all of these methods are called actions. So the terminology to remember is within controller, we will have actions. The next folder that we have is the models folder. Here, as of now, we only have error view model. But as we proceed, we will be adding new models here. Any table that we have in a database, we will have a corresponding class as a model in this folder. We will also have view models, which will be a combination of multiple models, and we will discuss them in detail when we need them. Finally, we have the views folder. In here, if we expand, we have the shared folder in which we have the underscore layout and validation scripts partial, which we discussed, and we have view imports and view start. The new folder is the home folder, and in here we have index and privacy. And one thing to notice is inside the home controller, we have actions called index and privacy. So here, whatever data is being passed will be the model for these two pages or views. If we add a new controller here, let's say Bhrugen controller, then we will have to add a new folder here called Bhrugen to add the views for that new controller. You will understand this more once we start coding, but I wanted to give you a brief overview of all the three folders that we have. Now let's just understand how routing works in typical MVC. ASP.NET Routing is a pattern matching system which enables you to match the incoming request to a particular MVC action defined in a controller. When ASP.NET Routing Engine receives a request at runtime, it finds the match against the URL pattern defined in the route table. If any match is found, then it forwards that request to the controller. Otherwise, it will return a 404 not found message. When we will create a new ASP.NET Core MVC application, routes are already added to the project. If we switch back to our application, and if we go on startup.cs right here, where it's adding controllers with view to our pipeline, And when we see the middlewares, we have first the app.use routing and we have the app.use endpoints. Now you can keep endpoints or you can also use the routing without the endpoints. In versions 1 and 2 of ASP.NET Core, this was a part of MVC, but now it is a separate piece of middleware to make routing available to all the middlewares and not just MVC. So that's why we see app.use routing on top and then we have app.use endpoints at the bottom. Endpoint is a URL where incoming request will end up processing by the middleware. If you have used MVC before, you know that you have to specify the routes for this, and right here we are specifying a default route in which if nothing is defined, it will look for the home controller and it will call the index action inside that. Now ASP.NET Core is not just MVC. It supports different technology which uses routes like Razor Pages, SignalR, and MVC. And the routing is different for each one of them. All of this tag uses middlewares that registers the endpoints. So if we see here right now, we only have the MVC endpoint that is registered because that is what we'll be using in this application. In previous version of ASP.NET Core, routing was embedded in MVC, but that cannot work anymore since we have more than one technology which uses different types of routing. First we will do is we will add use routing, which will make the selected endpoint choices available to all the middlewares that follows after that. And when we will do use endpoints, at that point we'll be able to register and execute the endpoints. In Lambda expression, we have several extension methods to register endpoints. One of them you can see here is map controller route. Let's try to run our application and see what happens. In the URL, we do not have anything defined. It's just the domain name or localhost and the port number. In that case, if we go back, it should go to home controller index action. So if we go on Solution Explorer inside home, let me add a debugger inside index and privacy. Let's go back and press enter here. You can see it goes to the index action of the home controller, and when we continue, it will load the view for that. So the view, if you go to Solution Explorer, Views, Home, we have the index view. Right here, we have a welcome text, and that is what we see inside the UI. When we click on privacy, the link goes to home controller privacy action method, and then it should render the page inside the home folder in views and privacy page right here. So if we do continue here, you can see home privacy is loaded. So the first one here is the controller name and the later one is the action method. If you have not defined anything, it goes to the index action by default. So if you just define home, it goes to the home controller and loads the index action method. If you do not define home as well, it will go again to the home controller index action method, and that is because you have defined that in endpoint to use as a default controller and action method. So this was a brief overview of routing in MVC, and we'll continue exploring this more when we start building our application. Now that we have the MVC application created, in this section we will work on the same BookList project to perform all the CRUD operations, but we will use our MVC. We'll be adding models, views, and controllers, and we'll see how everything comes together. Let's get started with that from the next video. Now that we have brief overview of our MVC project, it's time to perform CRUD operations on the BookList again. So the first thing we will do is we will add model for our book. So we'll add a new class, we'll call it book, and in here we will add all the properties. First will be the ID, so we can use key data annotation, and we'll call it prop integer ID. Next, we'll use the snippet prop, tap twice, will be string name. We can copy this and paste this 2 more times. Name property, let me make it required. And the other one, I'll change this to author and ISBN. This looks good for our model. Once we have model in place, we need to add this to database. So there are multiple things that we have to do to add it to database. First, in the models, we'll add our dbContext class, which we will call application dbContext. In here, we need the constructor. So CTOR, and within the constructor, we need to pass the dbContext options. We'll do control dot here. Here we need to include the package for Microsoft.Entity Framework Core. We'll find and install the latest version. You can do this by going to the NuGet package solution, but I want to do it right here directly. Here we'll pass the application dbContext and we'll have options, and we need to pass it to the base class, the same options. Once we have that, the application dbContext should inherit from dbContext. Now that application dbContext is looking good, what we need is we need to add our book to the database. So whenever we have to add a table, we'll add that property inside the application dbContext. So we'll do prop. This will be of type dbSet on book. And let me call this books. Perfect. This looks good for our application dbContext. And this is exactly what we did in Razor pages as well. Then the next thing is to add connection string and to get the connection string inside configure services in startup.cs. So we'll go to appsettings.json, and in here let me paste the connection string. Now remember one thing, that the server name you have to double check. So make sure if you are using this connection string, copy the server name, go to your SQL server, paste it here. You just need 1 / and try to connect. As long as you're able to connect, you can use the same connection string. The project, let me call this BookList MVC. For the database name, we have trusted connection to true and multiple active result sets to true. Great, so this looks good. And the connection string have been added in appsettings.json exactly like we did in Razor pages. The last thing that we have to do is we need to configure startup.cs to use that connection string. So within the configure services, we will add services.addDbContext. In here, it will be on application dbContext. We'll have to do a control dot here to include models, and we need to pass the options for SQL Server. So options goes to options.use SQL Server. We'll have to install a new NuGet package. Let me do control dot here again. And I do not see that NuGet package here. So what I will do is I'll just go to Tools, NuGet Package Manager, Solution, and we'll search for SQL Server. We have the package, which is Microsoft.Entity Framework Core.SQL Server. Let's install the latest version here. Perfect, it is installed. Now if we go back and if we do control dot, we'll see the using statement for Microsoft.Entity Framework.Core. And once we do that, there we go. Here we need to pass connection string from the configuration. So we'll do configuration dot, we have a get connection string here, and we need to pass the name inside our app settings, which is default connection. We'll copy that and paste it right here. Let me break it in a new line. There we go, looks much better. This looks good for all the configuration that we have to do, but we also want to add the Razor compilation package. So right here, let me add the Razor compilation package. Actually, we'll search for runtime compilation. There we go, and install the package. This package we are installing so that if the application is running and we change anything in the view and we refresh, we don't have to restart the application. Whoops, there we go. And right here, we'll do add razor runtime compilation. Great. This is exactly what we did with razor pages as well. That's why I'm not spending much time here. Once you do this, let's add a migration. So we'll go to Tools, NeoGit Package Manager, Console. We'll add migration, add book to DB. And here we see an error with the migration. That's because if we go to Tools, NeoGit Package Manager, we have to install package for entityframework.tools. So if you search for entityframework.tools, we'll install the Microsoft.entityframework.core.tools to our project. Once that is installed, then add migration should work. Awesome. Let's go back to Package Manager and hit the command one more time. This time it is already building the project, it was successful, and it adds a migration right here. Great, the migration looks good. Let's update the database to push our model to database. It will first create that database and then it will add the tables. Great, let's go back to make sure it's working. We'll go to database in SQL Server. We have the new database. In there, we have our table called books. And great, we have all the columns as we wanted. Once we add the model to our database, next thing, let's go to our master page, which is _ layout, and let's add a link for a new controller for our book. We'll copy the li here, the new controller, let's call it books controller. And in there, we'll have an index action. We'll call this as BookList. And let's add a new controller. Inside controllers, we have the home controller. In here, we'll add a new controller. We'll go with the empty controller for MVC. And we'll call this as Books Controller. With the name of the controller, controller has to be added at the end, so whatever name you give before controller will be the name of that controller. In this case, it will be Books Controller. Great, our controller is added, and in here we have the index action. Let's try to run our application and see what happens when you click on the link, since we already have index action. In here, it will take you to Books Controller index action, but since we do not have any view, it will give an error that the view index was not found. It tried to look inside views books index.cshtml, and since it did not find it there, it also looked inside the shared folder. So even though we have the action method for index, we do not have the view. To add a view, what you can do is inside our views folder, you can create a new folder with the same name as your controller, which is books. And in there, you will have to add index view. You can do that in Solution Explorer, or you can just right click on index and click add view. Here we'll go with the empty view, and we do not want it to be a partial view. Partial view is something that you want when you will be consuming that inside some other view. But in this case, index will have a page by itself. That being said, we'll select use a layout page because we want the same header and footer for our index page as well. Let's hit add here. Perfect. Now if you run the application and if you navigate on the link, you will see the word index, as you can see right here. So we click here and great, we see our view in action. Let's continue working here in the next video. Now in this video, since we have our application running with the index, I want to install few third-party tools. First is a sweet alert that I want to display nice alerts in our web page. Next is a toaster notification. And in here, if we go to toaster.js, we go to demo. And when you click show a toast, you see we have nice toaster notifications here. We'll use this when we delete our book. So we'll use toaster, and the last one is DataTables. Here we get sorting functionalities, number of pages, paging functionality, and search right out of the box. So we'll be using all three of them. Now you can go here and get the CDNs, or I will have that attached with the lecture. So let me open that up, and within the attachments you will see css_js. We will copy the CSS. Let's go back to our application, and in here let me close everything. We'll be adding that in our master page, because once we add in the master page, it will be accessible in all the other pages. So on top here, we will be adding the CSS, and when we scroll down, we have to add the JavaScript. So we'll copy that and we'll paste it right here. So perfect, this looks good, and we have added all three of them to our project. Now, since our application is already running, in our Razor pages with index, we used DataTables and we added a JavaScript. We'll do the same in this MVC project as well. The JavaScript will have the exact same functionalities. Before we work on the JavaScript, let's work and create the action methods inside our controller. Let's do that in the next video. Now within our BookList MVC project, we want to work on our controller, which is the books controller. Let me open up the Razor project that we built. In here, I have pulled up the Razor project in which we added the API calls to get all of the book as well as to delete a book. This calls will be exactly the same. So we can copy this, and let me close that project. We'll switch back to our MVC project, and within our books controller, since those are API calls, we will create a region here and we'll call it API calls. I will end the region as well, and between there we will paste the code that we copied. Now first thing in controller, when we have to access database, we need the application DB context. So we'll have private read only application DB context. We will do a control dot to include using booklist MVC.models, and we'll call this _DB. We need to get this using dependency injection. So we'll create a constructor here, and we will have the application DB context DB, and we'll do _DB is equal to DB. This you must be familiar by now that we need to do this to get the DB context using dependency injection. Then if we scroll down, rather than book, what we have is books inside our application DB context. Then for toList and async, we'll do control dot to include Microsoft.EntityFramework Core. We'll make books in all the places. Other than that, everything will be same for get all and delete APIs. Once we have that, then inside index, when we return back to the view, we do not want to pass anything here, because we will be loading this view using the API call right here with the help of DataTable. So let me go to the view, and in here we need to add calls for our JavaScript. That being said, the JavaScript will be exactly same with 1 or 2 modifications as compared to our Razor code. So I have that in the attachments as well, which is exactly same as what we have in the Razor project. We will copy this, go to Solution Explorer, wwwroot.js. We will add a new item, and this will be a JavaScript, and we'll call this booklist.js. Let me paste the code that we copied. All we have to change here is URLs. all that was changed here was the URLs. Here we had API/books inside Razor Pages, but in MVC we do not have that. We are in the books controller, and if we want to call any action method in here, all we need is the controller name followed by the action name. So the API calls are get all and delete, because of which if we go to booklist.js to get all of the books, we are calling books, which is the controller name, followed by the action name, which is get all. That will retrieve all of the books. Then when we have to edit the book, we are calling the controller, and then right here you see an action name which is Upsert. We do not have this action yet, but we will add this in the upcoming videos. Lastly, you see inside the delete here, we are calling the books controller and then the delete action method with an ID which we are passing, which is the ID of the book. So if we go to books controller, we have the delete action, and here we are expecting an ID. So you can see the chain is exactly similar as we did inside the Razor Pages. That being said, our JavaScript is in place and our controller API are in place. All we have to do is we need to add the table and call our JavaScript in index. Let's do that in the next video. In this video, let's modify the index view and see how it looks. We do not need a model in this because we'll be loading everything using DataTables. We'll add a div, give it a class of container and row, and give it padding 0 and margin 0. Within this main div, we'll add a div with class of column 6, and we'll have our title here. We'll use bootstrap class for text info, and we'll call this BookList. After this column 6, let me add another div, give it a class of column 6, and here I want the button. Rather than 6 here, let me make it column 3 and offset it by 3. And we will add a button or a link here. Now this link I want us to redirect to an Upsert page where we can create a new book. So in order to redirect, just like we had ASP page inside Razor Pages, in MVC we have ASP action. Let's say if you want to redirect to action in a different controller, we also have ASP controller. So here you can write books controller. In there we have the Upsert action which we will add. Then we will add some bootstrap classes btn, btn info, and we'll give it form control. We'll also make it text of white. There we go. And in here I will display add new book. Now in this case, since the Upsert action will also be added inside the books controller, it is okay if you do not write this. So this is optional, but I will leave it there. After this div, let me add another div, and this time I'll give it a class of column 12 for our main table. Along with column 12, I will add border and I will give padding 3. Then here we want our main table. We'll give it an ID that we have inside booklist.js, which is dt_load. We'll copy and paste it. We'll add some bootstrap classes like table, table striped, and table border. Table bordered. Along with that, I'll also add a style to give it a width of 100%. Perfect. Here we will add t-head for the headings, in which we'll add the table row. We'll have the th tag. We want to display name, author, ISBN, and buttons to edit and delete. So ISBN, author, and the last one will have the buttons to edit and delete. That being said, we need our reference to booklist.js. So we'll add section, scripts, In here, we will add the script tag, add an src for JavaScript BookList.js. Once you do all of that, let's run our application and see how things look. Let's go to BookList here, and great, it's loading and no data found. That's because we have not added any book yet, but we can see the data table is loading as expected. If you click on Add New Book, it will give an error because we have not added that action method or that view. In the next video, let's work on the Upsert Get Action method and the view. In this video, let's work and create an Upsert Get Action method. Upsert View will be used for two places, one to edit a book and one to create a book. Based on that, sometimes it will retrieve an ID if it is for edit. If it is for create, there won't be any ID. So we can copy this index, paste it here, and we'll call this action method as Upsert. In here, parameter, it can receive an ID or it cannot. So we'll make this a nullable parameter. That being said, now you need a book object with Upsert. So we can add that book object right here. We'll do prop. It will be a book object and we'll call this book. Now we can use bind property here, and once you bind that property on post, you won't have to retrieve that. It will automatically be binded. That being said, inside the view here, first let's initialize the book is equal to new book, and then we will check here if ID is equal to null. If this is null, that means this is for a create request, and we will return back to the view the book object, which is just a new object. If this is not the case, that means this is for an update. If someone wants to update a book, we need to retrieve all the data for that book from database, and we have to display that. So we'll retrieve that in book here from db dot. We have the books object or model, and we just want to retrieve one book. So we can use first.default here, and we'll say u goes to u.id is equal to the ID that we retrieve right here. After that, we can check here if book is equal to null. If this is null, that means there is no book in the database, and we will just return not found. If we find that book, we'll return back to the Upsert view, but we will populate the book which we have retrieved from the database. So the view will expect a book regardless of if it is used for create or update. This looks good for the Upsert Get Action method. In the next video, let's add the Upsert View. In this video, let me add the Upsert View. We can right-click on the action method and we'll click Add View. This looks good. Let's add this. Now the Upsert View, first thing, what will be the model? If we take a look at the books controller, we are passing a book object to the view. So that will be the model. So we'll define model. It is booklist mvc.models.book. We'll add a br and we'll add heading here. Give it a class of text info. Here we want to display edit book or create book based on the request. If we go back to our controller, if ID is null, then we pass the book object with a null ID. So if ID is null, then it is a create request. So right here, null will be 0. So we can check at, and we'll say if model.id does not equal to 0. If it is not 0, then display edit, else we will just display create. Along with that, we want to display book. This way the single line will serve both create and edit book to display the title. We will add br here and we'll add a main div, give it a class of border, and we'll add container. We will give it a style for padding of 30 pixels. Within here, let me add a form tag and we'll give method of post so that whenever a user submits the button, it will go to the post action method for Upsert inside the books controller. Here, you can also define the action method as Upsert, but since we are on the Upsert, if you do not define this, that will also work. If it was some other action method as compared to the name, then you would have to define it. But in this case, we are good. Now when we will be posting it, we will need the ID if the ID is not null. So we'll add an @if here and we'll check if model.id is not 0. Then I want to store that ID in an hidden property. So input type is equal to hidden, ASP4 will be the ID. Then just like Razor Pages, we want validations here. So we'll add class of text danger and we'll use ASP validation summary for model only. Then we'll start displaying our property in class of form group and row. And in each one of them, we'll add a div, give it a class of column 3. First, we want to display label with ASP4. This will be name. And we'll add a div, give it a class of column 6. In here, we want the input type. So input ASP4 tag helper. This will be for name of the book. And we'll give it a class of form control. Along with that, we will add a span with ASP validation for our name, and we'll give it a class of text danger. This looks good for our first property. Let me copy this and paste it 2 more times. Let me do it 3 times actually. After name, we have author. We'll copy this and paste it here. And we have ISBN. We'll copy and paste it here. Once we complete the ISBN, next will be button to create or update and a link to go back to the page. So we'll have column 3 here. Let me also make it an offset of 3 and this one will be 3. In here, let me add a button of type submit. Since we are in a form, this will be good. We'll add btn primary, and form control. Then what we want to display in button is we want the same logic that we had right here. So we can copy this and we'll paste it here. Rather than edit, we will display update or create. Next is a link to go back. So right here, we can display an anchor tag with the tag helper ASP action. If we click this action, we want to go to the index section of books controller. Since we are already in books controller, it's okay if you do not write ASP controller here and just ASP action is sufficient. We'll add some bootstrap classes here, btn success, and form control, and we'll display back to list. That being said, let's save this and let's run our application. In here, if you go to BookList and we do not have any data, let's add a new book and hit create. Great, we have the validations, but when we hit, it goes back. We do not want that. So for that, we will add the scripts right here. So we'll add section scripts, and in here, we will add partial name of. If we go to our shared, we have validation scripts partial. Let me do rename and copy this and we'll paste it right here. Let's run our application and give this another try. Let's go to BookList. Let's try to add one, hit create. This time it did not do a post back and displayed the validation. We will fill in some details and hit the create. Nothing will happen. The reason is we have not configured the post action method for Upsert. Let's do that in the next video. Now that we have added the Upsert View, what will happen when we hit the button with all the details? For that, we need to add an Upsert Post Action method. So we can just copy this and we'll paste it one more time. This time we need to mention that this is an HTTP post. This time we need to mention that this is an HTTP post, and with post methods we have to use validate anti-forgery token to use the inbuilt security to prevent some attacks. That being said, in Upsert, right here you can use book and we'll retrieve the object like this when we use submit with a form. But if you go to the top, right here you are using bind property, because of which you do not need this. You can directly access the book object that we have inside our controller. Now within the Upsert, what is the first thing that you should check? We should check if model state is valid or not. So if model state is valid, only then proceed further. If it is valid, then we will check here if book.id is equal to 0. If this is 0, this means it is a create, and we will do _db.books.add, and we will add the book object there. Else it is for an update. So we'll do _db.books. We have an update method in here, and we just need to pass the object that has to be updated. It will update this based on the ID inside this book object. Once all of this is done, we need to do _db.savechanges to push all the changes to our database. Once the changes have been pushed, we want to return, but in Razor pages we were using redirect to page. In MVC we will use redirect to action, and we can redirect to the index action. So what it will do is after it saves the changes, it redirects to the index action here, and it will load all of the books again from the database. This looks good. Let's run this and give this a try. Let's go to BookList here, add a new book. We will fill in some details and hit the create button. Great, you can see our DataTables is also working with the new book. Let's try to update this. You can see create and edit, both the functionalities are working as expected. The only thing that is remaining is delete here. Now when you click on delete, you see a nice sweet alert. And if you click OK here, it should delete the book and it displays a nice toaster notification. You can see our create, edit as well as delete are working as expected. Now with this you can see how we can perform CRUD operations on BookList using an MVC project. And this is just the beginning. There is much more to explore in ASP.NET Core. Whether you go with MVC or Razor pages, what we just learned is the tip of the iceberg. So if you are interested in learning more about MVC or Razor pages, I have many more in-depth courses in which we will be building real-world application. But that's all we had for this course, and good luck with your future projects.